whose human rights are we talking about here when we are debating about this case?
Well, the center of the case is the best interest of this poor little boy, and we look to what those interests are and how they are best met. That has been the focus of the British courts looking at this case. And of course, to be fair, I think all persons involved, all had a stake and a view about what was best for this little boy in a very tragic case, in a very sad case.
The issue here, Professor Fu, is that this boy, very young, he could not make his own opinions known, and therefore the parents are making the decision for this boy and representing the boy to the others. But the question is whether the boy has been rightly and respectfully represented. I guess that is the very center of the argument here. What do you think?
Well, I think emotionally I'm with the parents, and legally I have to respect the court judgment. But at the crux of the issue is that I see tensions between the principle of maximizing welfare, respecting individual choice, and finally how to promote virtue. And I guess the court probably has weighed the tension of the three and made the final decision. It's sad to see this case, but ultimately society has to come to a conclusion.
Mr. Liu, the thing here is not the easy life or death. It is more about what kind of life, what kind of death. Is it a life going to be of quality, or actually it's a life that is going to forever suffering and never be able to recover? But that has been quite an ethical issue that we have been debating, not just for this boy, but many people. In fact, whether they're adults or children who are suffering from diseases, particularly terminally ill diseases. So, Mr. Liu, what's your judgment here? What do you think is the most important priority according to you?
Yes, Tianwei, you are quite right that this kind of case is not a particular case, but from the a very sad story, again, we could see more about this kind of difficult issue we have to consider. That is, it's easy to say we should guarantee right to health, right to life of any individual, but due to the limits of the technical development, sometimes we have to respect the reality, respect the professional opinions. Just as the professor mentioned just now, the key issue is the best interest of the child. So they consider the same. The different parties consider the best interests of the child, but who decide last and what is really the best interest of the child is quite difficult to balance.
It is debatable on that issue, and therefore let's go to Professor Brooks. You are a professor of law, and therefore help us to understand, under those legal circumstances, how should we understand and interpret so-called the rights of the child and the welfare, the benefits of the child? Professor Brooks.
Yes, well, in reading the High Court's decision, in reading it on appeal to the Supreme Court, what the legal position is, it's a very settled one of looking at the best interest of the child from an independent standpoint. There are disputes between parents about what is best for a child, where each parent has a different view, which are incompatible, and a court must decide. In this case, there is a difference of opinion between the Great Ormond Street Hospital, which had Charlie Gard as its patient, and so in a position of care to determine what kind of care that child received, and of course Charlie's parents, who had a different view as to what should happen next. In looking at the best interest of the child test in this case, it was determined by law that there was no prospect of there being really any substantive or even minor help that any kind of treatment might give to the child. That the child was had suffered irreversible brain damage, was left living solely by the use of a machine. There were concerns about what kind of life that was and what kind of discomfort that Charlie was suffering. And what's been called the experimental treatment in the United States has actually never once been tried on an animal for this condition, let alone any human being, with unknown effects for Charlie. And the doctor who would be administering this, who's been promoting this, said to the court that it was very unlikely that this would have any effect to help the child. And so these were the considerations that weighed in on this very sad case. But of course, we all understand the parents trying to do everything they possibly can, which makes this case such a difficult one.
It is a difficult one. But we also have heard that there are different legislations, of course, in the different states of the United States, even just for one example. For example, the state of Kansas, for example, they has something called the assignments law, which is prohibiting the hospitals from withdrawing or taking away the life supporting system for any children under the age of 18 without the consent of the parents. That certainly seems to be quite a firm kinds of decision coming from the local legislation. But many wonder, is that kind of local legislation going to be helpful? Is the children's rights are absolutely going to be guaranteed as a result of this? Or actually this is sacrificing the children's rights for the rights of the parents, whatever their decisions are? Professor Brooks, I want to go back to you before I go to the other guests.
Well, my view on that is I think that it should be largely left to medical professionals to give some steer on what should come next. To have a blanket operation that will treat all the same, irrespective of whether it'll make any difference or provide any benefit, and indeed might prolong the suffering of those who are enduring the life-sustaining treatment in general. I think that is I can see why lawmakers might ideologically make that view, but I think that they ought to be open-minded and flexible about the medical reasons that should weigh in on occasion on cases in general.
Well, you know, Professor Fu, here in Beijing, the reason why people are paying so much attention to it, of course, we have this love for this child who, of course, has been suffering tremendously since the time he was born. But, you know, it also has a lot to do with what about the other cases? Not just for this child, not just for Charlie, little Charlie, but also for many others at different age groups in different countries. Many people suffer from diseases and they are living on life support system in the hospital, and there's no quality of life as we all know it. And yet there is the very big dilemma, whether it's for the patient or for the relatives of the patients or for the hospital or for the welfare and medical system to make a decision. Professor Fu, what are some of the factors we really need to weigh here, and what is the ultimate respect and the rights of an individual that we're talking about here?
When we see different kind of judgment, one way to understand those judgments is sort of to do reverse engineering to the fundamental principles that we affirm.
What would that be?
One is to have individual choice. The other is how to distribute the welfare. So there is a tension between the limited resources and the individual desires that you have. So in spite of the emotional judgment that usually would see on the side of the parents, and those emotional judgments need to be balanced out with the professional judgment. In this particular case, it's the medical judgment about the quality of life and the validity of the technical equipments that we have to sustain life.
But Mr. Liu, as you may know, even for adults, when they are suffering to really an extreme degree and want to forget about the life supporting system, they just want to, you know, be able to go away from the earth or be able to with dignity, shall we say. But that, of course, also has a lot of legal limits in various different countries, China included as well. So how, once again, I want to put the same question to you. what is the ultimate respect for an individual and for a human being? When one is making a decision about his or her own life, whether others' opinions really matter and to what degree, under what circumstances? Mr. Liu.
Yes, it's a kind of a sensitive, complicated issue. And from the current case, we found we are moved that so many people, they care the rights, the life of the little Charlie. It's understandable that all of us try to go all out, try our best efforts to help to save the little life. But reality is reality. Sometimes we have to behave reasonably. So the law and the society have to deal with difficulty issue in a balanced way. The key issue in this case, I think, is the right of the child. The child himself is the holder of the right. We should respect the best interests of the right holder. And the different parties, like the parents, the hospital, the courts, are the different actors to guarantee, to judge.
But you know, Mr. Liu, what we are talking about is not Charlie's case alone, but rather many other individuals, adults included, when they are suffering from tremendous disease, they want to be able to make their own decision. But here is the very complicated decision-making process as well. It's not just their own, but rather involving a lot of other players. We wonder whether that is fair, to what degree, whether to others' opinions should matter, and to what extent. Mr. Liu, do you have an opinion?
Yes, I see it depends on the different capacity of the rights holder. So for child, for adults, for the elderly, they have different capacity. So the patient, him or herself, and the person surrounding him or her should take the responsibility to judge, to evaluate in different cases.
It really depends, so according to you. What about to you, Professor Brooks, as we are running out of time? Professor Brooks, what are some of the factors, and whether one's own opinion about one's life, how, to what extent should be respected by the others? Whether others' opinions should matter about your own life?
Well, I think the opinions do matter, and indeed the parents in this case, their opinions mattered. They disagreed with the hospital. They wanted to challenge it. They all looked to see was there any type of treatment anywhere that might be able to provide some type of benefit.
That is for this case, but what about for adults?
To help the little boy.
We all understand that. We talked about that already.
For adults, yeah, okay. Well, I think for adults it'd be the same type of situation. If adults were unable to give expression to their interests, then it would be the same type of case. If they were able to give expression to their interests, then I think it would also play out similarly. You know, it's not just the individual that has a say, others have a say as well. They should all be considered. Of course, if I was a patient and I had expressed a view in a living will, about how I should be treated by a life support machine, I think that's something that is widely recognized by many jurisdictions as having some very serious weight.
Right.
When it comes to parents and children in general, parents have a strong weight on that, and that's generally recognized both in this particular case and widely. So it's a balance between competing interests, not one or the other.